Hello, I'm Esther Gidhu. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. As intense fighting continues between Israel and Hamas, hospitals in southern Gaza are warning that overcrowding at shelters for the displaced, deteriorating sanitary conditions, as well as shortages of food, clean water and medicine are making children ill and risk spreading more disease. Voters in the Democratic Republic of Congo are determined to cast their ballots on Wednesday, despite the security challenges keeping their hopes high that the winner will bring positive change to the country. And in our entertainment report, American opera and oratorio star Justin Austin joins Heather Maxwell in studio to talk about how singing opera is still relevant today in America and in Africa. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah on Friday as talks over post-war scenarios for Gaza are held. The United States agrees with Israel that the fight against Hamas will take months, but officials are discussing the timetable for scaling back from high-intensity combat to more precise ways of targeting the militant group's leaders, the top U.S. envoy said this on Friday. Now, this comes amid growing American unease about the mounting death toll in Gaza. President Mahmoud Abbas lost control of Gaza when Hamas drove out his security forces in 2007. A senior U.S. official said that Sullivan and others have discussed the prospect of having those associated with the Palestinian Authority's security forces before the Hamas takeover serve as the nucleus of post-war peacekeeping in Gaza. Any role for Palestinian security forces in Gaza is bound to elicit strong opposition from Israel, which seeks to maintain an open-ended security presence there and says it won't allow a post-war foothold for Abbas-led Palestinian Authority. Meanwhile, Western nations and the European Union Friday urged Israel to take concrete steps to halt unprecedented violence by Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank. In a joint statement published by France's foreign ministry, the call from Australia, Britain, Canada, France, the European Union and several other European countries, but notably excluding Germany and the United States, highlighted an unprecedented number of attacks perpetrated by extremist settlers since early October that they said had claimed 8 Palestinian lives and wounded 83 people. As intense fighting continues between Israel and Hamas, doctors in southern Gaza are warning that the overcrowding at shelters for the displaced, deteriorating sanitary conditions and shortages of food, clean water and medicine are making children ill and risk spreading more disease among the young people. Lucy Fielder reports.
Conditions at overcrowded shelters in Gaza are making children ill, according to Ahmad Al-Farah and other doctors in the enclave's overwhelmed hospitals. The paediatric ward Al-Farah works on at the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, has seen a sharp rise in young patients. Many have infections such as acute gastroenteritis, which he describes as an epidemic.
The number of cases has increased to 4 times its normal levels. Most of the water being consumed by children is unfit for human consumption. Most of the food is canned. People have lost access to fresh food. There's no fruit, no vegetables. Children have had a deficiency in vitamins, immune deficiency, in addition to iron deficiencies and anemia from the lack of nutrition.
Hepatitis A is also appearing at the shelters, he says.
This is a very dangerous indicator that should be paid attention to. From overcrowding and consuming food not fit for human consumption and using shared toilets.
The UN Humanitarian Office warned on Wednesday that Gaza faces a public health disaster due to the collapse of its health system and the spread of disease, as Israel wages an offensive that has hit hospitals and displaced most of Gaza's 2.3 million people. Children are admitted with extreme dehydration to the point of kidney failure, doctors say. They are seeing an increase in breathing problems as families resort to burning wood and garbage to cook. There's also a severe lack of medicines in Gaza, which Israel has blockaded, to treat the children. Mahmoud Abu Shah has taken shelter in this makeshift tent with his 3 children, who are all under 3 years old. Conditions at this camp for the displaced in Khan Yunis are making them ill, he says, and there's little treatment available.
The eldest caught gastroenteritis, then the second, then the third. Day after day I go to the hospital seeking treatment, but they haven't got the treatment the children need. They gave us some medicine to drink, but it's not enough to cure them.
The World Health Organization has also reported a sharp rise in acute respiratory infections, diarrhea, lice, scabies and other fast-spreading conditions. Juliette Toomer of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, says the schools were not built to house people.
Most of the shelters are not equipped with the toilets or the showers or the clean water that people need in these shelters, simply because the numbers of people that came to these shelters is just overwhelming. And also because many of these shelters that we've opened to receive people who were forced to flee their homes were not meant to be shelters.
Gaza's health authorities say about 18,000 people have been confirmed killed and 49,500 injured in Israeli strikes, with thousands more missing and presumed dead under the rubble. Deaths from North Gaza aren't being counted currently because they occur beyond the reach of ambulances and functioning hospitals. Israel launched its war on Gaza to destroy Hamas after the Palestinian militant group sent its fighters on a rampage in Israel that killed 1,200 people.
That was Lucy Fielder of Reuters reporting. Israeli forces and Hamas battled fiercely throughout Gaza on Friday. Witnesses say Israel's ground offensive was meeting stiffer resistance as the U.S. said it expects its ally to alter a war strategy that has inflicted a huge death toll. I spoke to Mr. Carl Scow, Deputy Executive Director at the UN World Food Programme, who was in Gaza, and began by asking him what he witnessed.
What I found, of course, is a lot of displacement. A lot of people now moving south. They first went from the north to the middle, and now they're moving from, as the military operation is moving south, they're moving further south. So there are people everywhere, on the streets, camping on the sidewalks. The shelters are completely overcrowded, and a lot of confusion. Where are we going? What's happening next? And of course, very few answers. What I also found was that there is a lot of fear in there. You can see it also in the eyes, not least of the children. They've been through a lot, and when you speak to them, of course, they are desperate. There is an increasing sense of desperation, and now the risk of further breakdown of law and order. I saw that visiting these food distribution sites where there are massive crowds lining up, and increasingly angry crowds who are trying to get, of course, as much as they can, because they also don't know when the next shipments, the next deliveries are going to come.
And now you are in New York, and I believe you've met with UN officials. What are your recommendations for the United Nations officials?
Well, for WFP, we focus very much on the food security situation. So during the 7-day pause, we were able to do a survey. We have now concluded that about half the population is on the brink of starvation, and 9 out of 10 families are not eating enough. That means that they are not eating every day, or they don't know where the next meal is going to come from. Next week we'll be issuing a report, an IPC report as it's called, that is a more verified and collaborative approach with other agencies and organizations that will put more light on the critical food security situation. But I'm also here to appeal for a better response. We have been able to reach some 1 million people since the start of the crisis. During the 7-day pause, we were able to deliver also in the north, reaching some 250,000 people. We are ready to deliver to another 1 million people, but we need access. We need, first and foremost, to be able to bring in supplies at more volumes. We need to open more crossings, not least Kerem Shalom from Israel, in order to enter with more volume and in a more controlled and orderly fashion.
You raised the concern of trying to reach people who are really in need, and we hear Israel saying it's trying to minimize civilian casualties and allow humanitarian aid for civilians. What did you see?
I mean, we are not able to scale up in the way that we want. Yes, we are getting some aid through in Rafah on the border of Egypt, but we're not able to get enough assistance in. And indeed, we're not able to move around in the way that we would want to. We are now limited to delivering only in the south in Rafah. And we know that there are massive humanitarian needs also elsewhere in the country. And so we are frustrated not to be able to deliver in the way that we would want to and that we could, given the resources and the procurement and the preparedness that has been done. And so we need to turn this around. And first and foremost, we need a humanitarian ceasefire, but we also need to get deliveries inside, supplies inside at a completely different scale. Ideally, we would also get commercial deliveries inside, because then we could resume our programs with vouchers and cash assistance, which also has positive impact on the broader economy, an economy that is under massive stress. And we shouldn't be comparing suffering. There are dire humanitarian needs elsewhere as well, in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in the DRC. But what we are seeing unfolding in the Gaza Strip right now is quite unprecedented in terms of its complexity and in terms of the pace in which the situation is evolving. And so a completely different kind of international response is needed.
Was Kao Skau, Deputy Executive Director at the UN World Food Programme. Earlier this month, the Sheni Election Commission, the body responsible for organizing elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo, announced that 24 candidates, including the incumbent Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi, have officially submitted their applications for the upcoming presidential election. He will bring years of frustration. Well, we'll hear more from Olivia Chan.
Registration of voters, the number of people who've been registered to vote, and then the fact that Sheni, their electoral commission, has been able to increase the number from 43 million to 49 million. The fact that they have been able to increase their voter rolls is very impressive. Related to that, we need to really applaud them for what they did in Belgium, what they did in Canada, what they did in France, South Africa, and the United States, basically bringing their diaspora to the table.
I was actually there when they were doing their voter registration, and I happened to be at some of the registration centers, and I thought it was a remarkable thing to see. Despite the challenges, people were able to line up and register to vote.
We need to give the Democratic Republic of Congo a lot of credit for a country that big with all its provinces, but they have had a peaceful transfer of power from somebody who we thought was not going to let go to a generational person who was in the opposition, or his father was in the opposition ever since 1981. Whether we like it or not, the Democratic Republic of Congo is in a bigger governance league, and so to speak, technically in terms of size, than Uganda and the Republic of Rwanda. I mean, these are things that we need to take into context.
You make a great point there. Certainly, despite all the issues that they had in the DRC, you cannot compare the DRC to the other countries in the region.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is a very strong example of people hungry for liberal democracy, people hungry for democratization, people hungry for governance.
Tshisekedi, of course, wants a second term. He's been fighting to get re-elected. He's run into a lot of governance issues. When he had just come in, he almost couldn't manage that country because of, I guess, the political issues that were happening.
The first 2 years were basically the post-Kabila administration with all the challenges until President Tshisekedi moved President Kabila out of the capital city. It was 2 administrations. Let me now just quickly address something that I think I understand about the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo has not had the significant support from the United States where we sit right now. And I say that they've given them a lot of government support, but the real rule and law of economic regulation talks about the private sector. The private sector investment from the United States into a country like Democratic Republic of Congo, which has a bilateral investment treaty to secure investment, is basically negative $1 million.
Wow. You seem to suggest that there is almost zero U.S. investment in the DRC as we speak.
Absolutely. Negative $1 million. The Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is the official document of the United States tracking, surveying private sector investment, it specifically says in 2021, there was about $31 million in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In 2022, it's negative 1. What are we to say about that?
That was analyst Dennis Matanda speaking to VOA's Paul Ndiho. Now to sad news here today at the Voice of America. We lost our colleague in Sudan, Shelton Doki, who was central to the VOA South Sudan in Focus program. He was South Sudan in Focus Bureau Chief and stringer coordinator in Juba. Doki died in a motorbike accident in Juba Thursday night. And since joining the South Sudan in Focus team as a reporter in 2009 and becoming Stringers Coordinator and Juba Bureau Chief in 2012, Doki contributed immensely to the South Sudan in Focus show. For a time, he co-anchored the show from Juba. More recently, he was busy filing reports from Juba, along with gathering breaking news from South Sudan and Sudan, assigning stories and editing scripts. He was the unsung hero behind the South Sudan in Focus radio show. We are grieving his shocking death. Now, we'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, in our entertainment report, American opera and oratorio star Justin Austin joins Heather Maxwell right here in studio. We'll be right back.
Experts say cultural expectation and individual aspiration are often the source of tensions and frustration between parents and children in the diaspora, particularly with girls. This week on Our Voices, we'll hear young African women talk about their quest to education and career achievements in the West while trying to fulfill their parents' wish to preserve family heritage, culture, and religion. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, Niger's ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, who has been held in detention since a July 26 coup, must be freed immediately. The court of the West African bloc, ECOWAS, ordered on Friday. The Abuja-based court called for his immediate and unconditional release and ordered that Bazoum be reinstated. Fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitaries on the outskirts of Wad Madan sent already displaced families fleeing again Friday, according to an AFP correspondent. The army blocked civilians from entering the city of Wad Madan, 180 kilometers south of the capital Khartoum, which had quickly become a safe haven when war broke out between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces on April 15. In Nigeria's Supreme Court on Friday overturned a judgment by a lower court that dropped terrorism charges against separatist leader Nnamdi Kanu, ruling that trial on the charges should continue. Kanu, a British citizen who leads the band Indigenous People of Biafra, disappeared from Nigeria after skipping bail in 2017. He was arrested in Kenya in 2021 and charged with terrorism. A woman was recently arrested in Atlanta and charged with trying to burn down the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In a video captured by bystanders, the 26-year-old woman is seen pouring gasoline on the historic property, which is now a museum. Jackson Vunganyi has more on the history of the house, which is part of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site dedicated to preserving the legacy of the civil rights leader.
One of the most well-known sons of this city is Martin Luther King. He was born in this house behind me in 1929. He lived here in this neighborhood, in this house, up until the age of 12. He lived here with his father, Martin Luther King Sr., a Baptist minister, and his mother, Alberta Williams King, a school teacher. The house is administered by the National Park Service and is part of buildings of significance to Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and legacy. And down the street from Martin Luther King House is Ebenezer Church, where his father and his grandfather worked as pastors. So as we're exploring this neighborhood where Martin Luther King lived for the first 12 years of his life, this firehouse, just a few blocks away from where Martin Luther King was born, was built in 1894, and it was the only firehouse around this area. This historic fire station number 6 served the Sweet Auburn community, including the King family. It highlights the history of the fire station and its role in the community. Atlanta, Georgia was part of what they called the Bible Belt, and at the time, on Sundays, all the shops would be closed except this firehouse. And so what the firehouse did to make an income is that they had some candies and other little knickknacks. So Martin Luther King would be here on the Sundays, on the weekends, to buy some snacks for himself as he walked down to Ebenezer Church, where his father and his grandfather preached, just down the street. The historic Ebenezer Baptist Church is where both Martin Luther King Jr. and his father Martin Luther King Sr. served as pastors. He played an important role in the civil rights movement. The King Center for Nonviolent Social Change was founded by Martin Luther King's wife, Coretta Scott King. It houses the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change and Martin Luther King Jr.'s tomb. In 1944, at the age of 15, Martin Luther King Jr. entered Morehouse College, a historically black college in Atlanta. He excelled academically and was exposed to intellectual and philosophical ideas that would shape his worldview. It was here that he was introduced to the philosophy of nonviolent resistance, particularly the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. This would become a cornerstone of his approach to civil rights activism.
A 32-year-old American opera and oratorio star, Justin Austin, joins Heather Maxwell live on set right here on Africa 54. He talks about his recent Kennedy Center Marian Anderson Vocal Award and how singing opera is still relevant today in America and Africa alike. Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell is here. Take it away, Heather.
Hi, Esther. Well, when most of us think of singers and songs, or even dream about being a singer one day, arias, recitatives, live orchestras, these things rarely come to mind. But they are exactly what opera singers dream about and do. We're going to meet one in just a moment, but first let's watch this.
From boy soprano to manly baritone, Justin Austin is singing his way to the top in the world of opera and oratorio. Lauded as a gentle actor and elegant musician with a velvety, dark voice, he's already made significant debuts on stages such as the Metropolitan Opera, Lyric Opera of Chicago, Los Angeles Opera, Carnegie Hall, and more. He's also a multifaceted musician, performing musical theater, R&B, and jazz with artists such as Aretha Franklin, Mary J. Blige, Elton John, Kanye West, Hugh Masekela, and Wynton Marsalis. And just recently, Austin won the 2024 Marian Anderson Vocal Award. That's the Kennedy Center's highest honor for a young American singer. What drives this 32-year-old American to sing opera, an art form of musical storytelling that dates back to 17th century Europe? And how, if at all, can his story and his dreams resonate with young Africans today?
Hey, Justin, welcome to the platform.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you. So what does motivate you to be a classical singer?
Well, to be honest with you, originally it was just the beauty of the music, the thrilling performances, the storytelling. Later on in my life, I realized how important it was to tell the story of humans. It's complicated, it's beautiful, it's complex. At the same time, it's necessary for us to explore all different facets of our humanity in order to understand one another, in order to connect with each other, in order to love one another.
Will you sing a little something right now?
Sure.
Pick up the mic. You don't really need the mic, but...
I'm a poor little orphan in this world. I'm a poor little orphan in this world. I'm a poor little orphan in this world. Good Lord, can't stay here by myself.
Beautiful, beautiful. We just have a few seconds. What can you tell African singers about opera? What can you say to them about it?
I think the most important thing I could say is to never be afraid to be yourself, to be who you are. You are enough. Early on in my career, I tried to be who I thought everyone wanted me to be, and I didn't meet much success.
Yeah.
And as soon as I was brave enough to stand on my own 2 feet and be